Hey, how's it going, David? I'm going to start this off by saying that this semester I earned myself a B. I say this because on the syllabus for B, I believe I did everything necessary in order to do so. Let's start it out. So first I'll go over everything we did this semester. I'll skip over the first couple of weeks with all the introductory phases. See week 1 here. This is my week 1 summary. Basically it goes over all of the sticky tape activities we did. What this taught us was that the opposite charges attract, similar charges repel, and neutral charged things are always attracted to charged objects, whether they're conductors or insulators. Conductors obviously have a stronger attraction than insulators, and this is due to them having free flowing electrons that are able to pass through the material. Moving on to, let's see, week 2 here. I'll open my Prezi. So week 2, yeah, we did Prezis. This is my week 2 summary. What we did coming into class, it doesn't look like I have much, but everything's hidden within the writing. We had to come into class prepared to do an experiment with the sticky tape lab. What we had to do was take all the right measurements in order to calculate the charge and then finally the number of electrons in each piece of tape given how much they repel and what their weight is and center of mass and whatnot. Moving on to Thursday, came into class having our 3D printed pieces, our first ones printed out, and got to admire those for a little bit, and then we started analyzing what exactly our sticky tape lab was about and what was happening when the two pieces of tape were pulled apart and how they became charged. Then finally we did the famous Van de Graaff, which ended up being significant for James and I since we built our own, and we did some more activities with insulators and conductors just to work with exactly when they're actually being charged or just polarized. And then of course we started some work with Arduinos, which again was very useful for the rest of the semester. So moving on from week 2, week 3 we had to use the infographic. Go into that, you see I used Evernote to do so, and the third week we again played with more of the Van de Graaff. We continued our first Arduino projects. James and I had number 8 and I believe 5, or 8 and 13 again, I'm sorry. And then we did more practice on exactly the difference between polarization and what happens when things are polarized versus actually being charged. Like here the panel is polarized since this insulator can't transfer electrons to a conductor. And then again reviewed the sticky tape lab for the week. Moving on to the fourth week here, we did a screencast like I am using now. Obviously it's very useful and I will be using it in the future. Also this week we began working with VPython. That was a lot of fun, I thought, doing the coding and just seeing exactly how the physics comes to play in a lot of things in our world. This week we did our first presentations, which was on the Arduino projects. James and I had number 8 and 13. We made a temperature sensor as well as a digital hourglass, and we presented those that week. Moving on to week 5 here. This week our weekly summary was a blog, vlog, or glog. I ended up using a video log. So I won't be going through that now, but we did VPython extensions, which again I thought was cool. I liked working with the coding, and we did our project to presented them. James and I did the Van de Graaff generator. That was a lot of fun to do, and it's fun to play with. See, moving on to week 6 here. I actually mention the neat resource for this week because I thought it was really cool. They're actually educational, informational. It's kind of like being able to take a class for free online somewhere, and you get very useful information from these MOOCs. And then the neat resource was Pinterest, and which is what we used for the weekly summary, and that's what I ended up using for the rest of the semester. Very useful. Let's see what we did here. So when I open it up here, you can see me and James began working on our Van de Graaff generator that I mentioned in the week we started prior. Again, this is our digital hourglass that we made, and the coding from it, we struggled a little bit with the extensions to it. It was a lot of fun to figure out, actually, because we just needed to understand the syntax of the coding. And this was first interview week, which was good in my opinion. So let's see, moving on to week 7 here. Discussion was engage me or enrage me. Talked about how students these days need to be engaged in school, but they're not, so they're losing interest in the material. We started working with gravitational electrical potential, and had to adjust our grades. My grade I was initially going for an A, but I realized I was running out of time every week, and it just wasn't working out for me with how often I was working. So let's see, I was wrong. Looks like I used Prezi one more time here. And let's see, Tuesday we went into class and reviewed a couple of pages we did with electricity and magnetism. David wrote some equations to help us connect the two because the equations are nearly identical. Then we played with the PhET game, which was a lot of fun to do on Tuesday, and I nearly got it. The final level, I did actually get it in quotes, cheating way. But on Thursday, we did more VPython work, and yep. So let's see, moving on to week 8 here. Again, working with electrical potential, and if we look at my week 8 summary, see James and I finished our Van de Graaff here, and we did a lot of point charge scenarios and what would happen, like what the electrical potential is in those scenarios given a certain point, and just getting an idea of exactly what the E field looks like in both dipole situations and multiple charge point charge scenarios. And then we worked with what was higher or lower potential scenarios as well, and these right here are equipotential lines. Just a lot of potential work. So then here, if we move on to see week 9, Neat Resource was cool because it worked with a 3D printer that replicates itself. I really wish to possibly go in with one of these with one of my friends, and then we could replicate each other one and build it all together, and that would be really cool. And hopefully, in the near future, most everybody will have a 3D printer. We did the project self-evaluation. I always give myself a B. I like to think of it as underrated, but it's most likely what I deserved anyway. This is so week 9 was the week after spring break. We went over the worksheet that we all should have done over spring break, but sadly nobody came with it having been completed. So this is one of the projects that I thought was really cool having come back, was the Infinity Mirror. And again, this is the weekly, the 3D printer that we went over the discussion, Neat Resource. And this is my weekly wrap up and what we learned for that week. Moving on to see week 10 here. Talked about the value of a higher education. It seemed as if David was not too fond of, I guess, everybody going to college, and because most people don't, or a lot of people don't use it for what they spend all their money for. It just might not be worth it for a lot of them. Well, let's see, my week 10 summary here. We did the 3D display. I thought it was really cool. The video I found on YouTube let you kind of cross your eyes and see an image in 3D, even though it was only 2D, just by displacing objects a certain distance on the screen. We worked with the Castle kits, learning about resistance, using the capacitor with the built charge, and with different sized filament bulbs. The capacitor would discharge faster or slower depending on their resistance. With a higher resistance, it would discharge slower because it allows less charge per unit of time. And then that Thursday we got to choose our interview times for the following week. Oh, and of course we also learned about parallel circuits versus series circuits, and the differences between them. in series circuits, voltage drops across every resistor. In parallel circuits, every resistor sees the same amount of voltage across it. Moving on to week 11. We had to decide our project 4. James and I did the Android controlled maze, and we began our coil guns for that week. And our neat resource was on dark matter. I thought it was really cool. Here, this is my week 11 summary on Pinterest, and we did the second interview on that week. So yeah, this is everything we did. Moving on to week 12. On week 12, we James and I had started printing the parts we needed for our project 4. We finished our coil guns and presented them in class. At the end of the class, it was pretty cool because James and I soldered in series another capacitor to our coil gun, which made it a lot stronger. We started learning about how the coil gun and the connections between electricity and magnetism, and how a current carrying wire creates a magnetic field around it, which is how the transistors step up the voltage within the circuitry of a flash camera to charge the flash, which also then, of course, charged our coil gun. And the neat resource was on metamaterials, which I thought was really cool that week as well. So moving on to week 13, it was the first week where we began watching The Elegant Universe, which is about the history and development of string theory. I thought it was really cool watching all 3 of these parts. Looking at my week 13 summary, we had to get ready for the seminar. That would be the following week. We did more worksheets on electricity and magnetism, saw just how an electric motor works. It's just a current carrying wire in a certain shape in the presence of a magnetic field, and we worked with more, again, electricity and particle charges and in magnetic fields, and used the right-hand rules to determine which direction the force would be felt on the charges. Alright, so moving on to our second last week of class here, week 14, we again watched part 2 of The Elegant Universe, involving the string theory and more of its development and theories within. Let's see my week 14 summary. James and I worked on our project 4, did more worksheets on electricity and magnetism, and let's see the flow of current through wires when in the presence of changing magnetic fields. We did the seminar on Tuesday. James and I had the Van de Graaff generator, which is really cool, and at the end of class on Thursday we took our post-assessment, which I thankfully passed with a high enough score to exempt me from the final interview. So finally, we are here at the present. I am at 13 minutes 20 seconds, and this is the week where we watched part 3 of Elegant Universe. I thought it was a great experience to have seen all of these videos. I've heard a lot about string theory, and I've never actually seen much about it. This was a great document about it, and just the complete history of it. I found it very intriguing, and it's information I've always actually wanted to have the time to see. So again, if I go over everything, I deserve a B because I did meet all the requirements necessary for a B. I didn't go through all of the neat resources or discussions, but I did have, through the first 5 weeks, at least 8 responses to each discussion, and I had my first initial post. The syllabus says to only have 85%. I had 100% discussion, first initial responses, and I had at least 5 additional responses for each. The daily assignments I completed 100%, as far as my knowledge. Neat resources, same thing, 100% as far as my knowledge goes, and 50-word abstract towards each one of my posts. I definitely think I did everything to deserve a B. I did a summary describing what you learned at the end of every weekly summary and how much time I spent. On average, per week, I would say around 8 to 10 hours in total. That would just around 140 hours for a 14-week thing. All right.